Shri Amit Khanna. It'll have panelists in Shri Sandeep Tarkas, Shri Shrikant Shastri, and Shri Anup Rungta. Anant Rungta, my apologies. We have a very eminent panel amongst us. Shri Amit Khanna packs in more than 3.5, 4 decades of wonderful professional career as a filmmaker, as a lyricist, as a media thought leader. He was chairman, Reliance Entertainment. He's amongst us to lead this panel. We have amongst us Sandeep Tarkas, who is the President, Consumer Insights and Managing Director, Future Brands. He has been a veteran advertising professional in media. We also have amongst us Shrikant Shastri, again, a veteran advertising professional, alumni of IIT Kharagpur, IIM Bangalore, an entrepreneur, founder of Crayon Data. And we have also amongst us Anant Rungta. Anant Rungta is the promoter, entrepreneur of very famous studios, which are perhaps the oldest institution in Bombay, making films and at the very sharp end of technology. This session is about technology. This session is about how technology is going to change media, change the way we consume media, bring about a new consumer of media, and pose challenges in front of advertising, media enterprises and entrepreneurs. May I now hand it over to Mr. Amit Khanna. All yours.
Thank you, Sushi. So where do I begin? You know, one of the problems which I face these days when I go into conferences and conventions is that I have to deal with analog minds. We are in the digital age, and we have people with analog minds trying to keep pace. Our history, our heritage, our culture is a given. We cannot do away with it. For more than 10 millennia, Bharat has actually assimilated several thoughts and visions, and over the last 5,000 years synthesized them into a garland of dreams, of aspirations, which has survived, and I think it will survive. So it is important for any nation, more so for a nation like Bharat, which has 1.2 billion people, and which by 2040 become the most populous country in the world, that we think of more of the future and not dwell on the past. What does the future hold for us? I am one of those persons who always believe that the glass is always half full. It's never half empty. A window is always half open, not half closed. You know, just imagine the change which has come in your lives. Let's begin with last 50 years, and then we narrow it down. 50 years ago, there were no transistor radios. There were only valve radios. Then came the transistor radios. Today, if you want to buy a radio, a traditional radio set is probably not available in any shop in the country, you'll have to go to some antique dealer or some really, vintage goods supplier or some radio enthusiast. And yes, in the last 3 or 4 years, some very, very high-priced radios sets have been reintroduced because they believe the sound which the old valve radio gives is more authentic sound than that which is created by transistors and diodes. I remember I joined film industry in 45 years ago, and there was no tape. You'll be surprised to know that a song was recorded on an optical film, just like a film. And if you made a mistake, that whole roll of film got wasted, and you have to start all over again. And that roll was imported, and for that there was a license. So it was a very, treasured commodity. Even the biggest producers could not afford it, to waste it, because you may not get a license to buy more stock. The only source of play out was a disc made of shellac, and it ran at 78.8 RPM, 78.4 RPM. And the disc was cut with a wax master, with a bamboo needle. That's how song recording was. And in fact, when All India Radio first started broadcasting recorded music in the 40s, it was that kind of a record which was played out. A temporary disc with a bamboo needle. There was no... And in the last 30 years, there is no sign of all this. We have the tape. Tape gave way to a cassette. The cassette gave way to CD. Today, 80% of music sales worldwide are online or digital. Similarly, film. When film was first started, it was shot on, most of it was black and white. Black and white film was a silver nitrate-based film, so it used to get spoiled because it had silver, so it used to oxidize. You'll be surprised that India till date has made 21 or 22,000 films from Raja Harishchandra in 1920. I'm talking about feature films, out of which only 10,000 survived. 11,000 have been lost forever because the negatives have got destroyed. There has been some attempt in the last couple of years to digitize our films. But so is, the thing that the original, some of the masterpieces are gone forever. Television came to India very late. Actually, I remember I participated on television. I used to be in Delhi within the first 3 days of its telecast in 1965 or 64, when it was a black and white 1-hour show every evening. And this was a transmitter which was brought to India in 1958 for an India Expo exhibition, where the present Pragati Maidan is, by the Germans, Germany in their pavilion. And then finally RCA from America donated a 1 kilowatt transmitter to Government of India to start television. That's how television started. It was only live. It was all instructional program because there was no, you have to shoot on film and then transfer it and run it. In a reversal film, it was very complicated. That's how it started. The program, there were maybe 500 sets in the entire city, which had been mostly with government, and I think some 200 sets had been gifted to schools. So that's how television started. Then black and white, 82, color came in. Then we had the famous one transmitter a day expansion of the 80s. And then, the second metro channel started on Doordarshan, and finally after the Gulf War, did we have pan-Indian television and satellite cable. So this much, some of you will remember, you have to have that antenna which you had to keep shuffling to try and get an image, and even then you had a ghost image and sometimes it went away. Slowly, in the early 90s, the cable started coming in. These were wires strung across roads by enterprising people there was no cable law. I remember it was in 1995, and Arun Jaitley had just taken over as the INB minister, and he'd been my junior in Delhi University. So I called him up, and I was heading the producers organization, and I said to him that we have a major crisis because there's a lot of piracy going on. So he says, what has piracy got to do with films? He couldn't fathom, although he was a lawyer. So he said, why don't you come and meet me? So I took some people with me. Yash Chopra was there, and a couple of other senior people, Subhash Ghai, and we went and met him. He was very nice. He called us home, and we explained to him the whole problem, that because now everybody has cabled illegally, they are showing pirated films, and people are not going to the theatres. Being sharp as he is, this was 1 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. He said, can you call a press conference in Bombay on Friday and have your colleagues there? I will announce a remedy for this. That's how the 1995 Cable TV Act came into existence. He came within 24 hours and announced that the government was going to amend the Cable TV Act, which still till today is the foundation of the entire cable and satellite industry, which is now due for revision. But this is all the past. Let's talk about the future, which is more exciting. Past is gone. I mean, it's there somewhere. Good to sit back and relax and think about as a good memory. What does the future hold for you? 20 years ago, we talked about internet, digital economy. I remember when I first mentioned about India, everybody was talking about the information age. I mentioned it, I wrote about it in an article in Economic Times, and I said, the information age is past. And then we moved on in new millennium to what we call the attention age. It was all about grabbing eyeballs. It was all about getting share of wallet. It was all about share of voice. How do you grab people's attention? From selling soaps to selling prime ministers to selling movies to sport. So this was how we transitioned into an attention economy. Most cultural anthropologists and media professionals still think we are in the attention age. Unfortunately, time moves in geometric progression. Society moves in arithmetic progression. So there is always a time lag between the two. There's always a delta which is created between the speed at which society changes and the speed at which technology enables or empowers you to change. So in this environment, we have now moved on, and I think for the next 10, 15, 20 years, we are going to be an engagement economy. It is no longer worth your while to grab attention. To be able to monetize that attention, you need to engage. Engaging minds is what it's ultimately all about. It is whether you're selling a product or a service or an ideology. Unless you are able to engage your mind, everything is transient. I may believe in something, and if I'm not able, people are not able to engage me, or that person is not able to engage me, I move on. And I move on to something else. So from trend to fad to an absolutely, it's not even Andy Warhol's 15-minute of fame. It's actually going beyond that. That's at one level. Let's talk at another very significant and tangible level. You know, this whole debate about whether content is king or distribution is king, I think is also becoming redundant. Actually, in this new age, and we have somebody here who's Srikanth, who's involved with big data, he'll probably tell us a little more about it. It's ultimately going to be between an individual via device or otherwise and the cloud for any goods and services. That cloud, that ephemeral cloud, will become the eternal repository. In fact, you know, I'm not talking science fiction. In 20 years, unlike what most space scientists are talking about, the first colonization of an outer Earth body is not going to be human. It's going to be of large server farms. It's not, you know, something which is very unrealistic, because the cost of space and, you know, the cost of delivery across space is, and compression technology is improving very fast. So it's going to be easier to get real estate on astral bodies than on geographical Earth. And as I said, this is not something which I'm saying 50 years from now. This will happen within the next 20 years. Our governments, the previous, this one is also currently grappling with it, is grappling about spectrum. I find this funny. You know, I'm surprised in a country of 1.2 billion people, they cannot find 5 experts who can tell them that the entire concept of 5G, which has already been deployed in real world, not in laboratories, this thing, but not by one, but 3 different locations and things. And we are talking about 1 terabit per second speeds. This technology is entirely based on another technology which is called SDR. SDR is software driven radio, where there is no fixed spectrum. We are foolishly fighting, the defense needs this, I need 900 megahertz, I need 700 megahertz, Prasar Bharati should release this. This they don't realize by 2020 you will have SDR being started to be deployed professionally. What is SDR? SDR basically is that there's a large computer base somewhere, and if you can imagine, you know, the information highways like your traditional highways, these highways, you need traffic controls. So you have traffic signals, or you have traffic cops who say, now there is traffic here, please go there. Now as this gets advanced, now people have watch it on a control room, on you know, and have a grid, etc. Similarly, you have the entire infrared to ultraviolet, the entire electromagnetic spectrum. There will be computers which will distribute these signals depending upon the suitability of that particular service. For example, voice or data can be carried in much smaller packets. I'm getting a little technical, but very shortly. And for video, you need larger packets, so you need more bandwidth, etc. Depending on where the concentration of population is, they will drive that. So you will not have the shortage of spectrum in any one particular area, because it will get divided. Now imagine what is when we talk about 1 terabit 5G, what does it do? To give a simple analogy, it will enable you to download 50 HD movies in 1 second. Now to put this in perspective, today the world uploads 5 exabytes of data daily. What is 5 exabytes equal to? Every single word, picture, movie, television, image recorded, written anywhere in the world in the last 5,000 years. What was written, recorded, drawn, painted, and in any picture is being uploaded every day. By 2020, this will become 1 terabyte. It's unimaginable. Now, if you have that kind of volume, what will your 1G, backbone do? And we are still debating it. So you will have the Delhi airport is already obsolete. It cannot handle that the traffic. You have to build another one. Similarly, your information highway will become outdated the day it starts, because somewhere else, somebody else would have moved on. When you try and think that 20 years ago there was no Google, can you believe it? I mean, if you go to a young 10-year boy and tell him there was no Google, he'll say, how did you study? How did you learn? That's the pace of change. The other things, because of the way we are doing, in the access is going to become easier. So we are seeing already some patterns. For example, in the US, this year 40% of television, and we are talking of 1400 channels, are watched online. They are not watched on conventional TV through broadcast. In the next 5 years, 90% of television in the US is going to be watched online. There will be no conventional TV. That does not mean people, this is the mistake which people are, device makers are doing. It does not mean delivery has nothing to do with my sensory pleasure. If I get access to something, it is not necessary or even, good or a sensible thing that I watch a movie on a mobile screen. I don't have to do that, because the next generation of phones, and this is 3 years from now, the first ones are already there. Your phone will have a built-in projector and your wall will be a screen. So you will access it through your mobile, but you will watch it on your screen, on a 10-foot screen. So it's not that I will watch, everybody will start watching movies on tablets and mobile phones. No, they will be the means of access. There are also near personal communication standards. We go into IEEE standards, which talk about, for example, the first thing, ICICI Bank, to name one, is going to launch an NFC card, a near field communication card, where you don't have to, it's like RFID, radio frequency identity, where you don't need to sign, you don't need a terminal to key in. You take your card and just flash it before a terminal, and the transaction is absolutely secure. There are no numbers, there are no passwords. So the first card will be out in 2 weeks in India. So similar kind of technologies, I don't want to go into a lot of technical details, will be available where, for example, I'll just give you a simple scenario. You start listening to a song, while you're having a shower. It's playing in a speaker in your, and I'm not talking of some luxurious palace. In an ordinary 1-2 room house, you'll have a speaker which will be playing a song. You are having a shower, you sing the song, it's not complete. So now you're not going to delay your bath because the song is not complete, you want to listen to it. You dry yourself, you come out, you're dressing up, and the song will seamlessly transit to your bedroom and it will start playing there. Or if you are listening to a news or a commentary on a match, it will move on to your bedroom, it will move on to your other room, it will move on to your car or your motorcycle where you're listening. And even as you travel through the metro, finally when you reach your office, and that whole experience will be all one seamless, because the transfer of one signal to the other will become very easy, and I'm talking of the next 5 years. So these are the changes which we are going to see very soon, in the next 5 to 7 years. Let's take movies. You see, what's happening is, again, because of this, the social change which we are going through. Just give me five more minutes and I'll stop. The movies have a unique quality. Movies, live concerts, large sporting events. The magic of those events is in a shared experience. It is not a personalized communication or engagement. You want to share with 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 people like a community. So they will remain. That shared experience, the joy of a shared experience will always remain. But I see strong polarization. So you will have a lot of disintermediation between individuals and individual consumers and customers and the creators. And you will have the large events where people will, it's more like a go out experience. It's not just limited to listening to a song or watching a movie on TV or a small screen or even at home. So they will be polarized. These will be expensive, large events, and you will have the rest of it sort of gravitating towards the other end of the spectrum. Finally, I'll just talk about social media. We are currently in Web 2.0, which actually means the ability, we were first from peer to peer, which was Web 1.0. Now we are what is called one to many. So this is unicast. I can talk from one to many, I can talk many to many. So you have the Facebooks, your Twitter. There is already Web 3.0. Now, why do I emphasize all this? You, Sushil, made a very important point in the morning. And unfortunately, not many people still understand this. Either in nobody in the media, and very few in the government and politics at large. That news is only 10% of the whole mind engagement. 90% is entertainment. If change could be brought about through news, I think a lot of you were giving a lot of importance to one particular news anchor. Boss, then there would have been no political change, neither in 1977, nor in 1947, nor in 2014. If news anchors, if one Arnab Goswami can let the nation, things that the nation wants to know, then I'm afraid he would, this country would not be where it is today. So don't overemphasize these news anchors. The same fools appear by rotation everywhere. They are jobless people, and that's the reality. So, and if you look at the viewership, even the worst program on ETC has more viewership than NDTV. That is the truth. Here is a numbers man, he will tell you that ETC has more viewership than NDTV. So what are we worried about? It is this media is of 5,000 people for 5,000 people. 5,000 people are talked about and 5,000 people watch it, or 50,000 watch it. So this will not matter. They will get disintermediated. They are now quoting Twitter and Facebook and other social media. What Web 3.0 will do, it's the simple term for it. There are two things which you keep in mind because they will impact your life within the next 2 years. One thing, it's called machine-to-machine web. So the second term which he's saying is Internet of Things. Internet of Things is that from your phone, you will be able to connect every single device which you have in your house. Your geyser, your fridge, your AC, your radio, your TV, your oven, your gas, everything. That's very simple. That will happen automatically. You will not have to do anything because every device within the next 2 years, after 2 years, will carry a chip like Bluetooth, which will be embedded. But what machine-to-machine communication will do, it will alter the landscape of social communication. Not one person is aware of it. Not prepared for it. The advertising community is the most ignorant. They are as ignorant as the media people. I have worked with all of them. I have edited a newspaper. I have made films. I have I was one of the persons who launched Yuvvani. I started independent television news in India before Prannoy. I have done the largest soaps in the country. I made the maximum number of films in some capacity or other. I am the only professional Indian who's worked in Hollywood in a major studio, with a major studio. So I understand this business through and through. We are not prepared for change. Unless we are not prepared for change, in the next conference which Sushil organizes, which I hope he does next year, we will still be talking about our 5,000-year-old heritage. We will still be talking about whether to call this a Hindu media conference or a Sanatan Dharma media conference or a world religious media conference. And we will still be talking about individual biases of people who do not matter. So let us try and inculcate a sense of immediacy in our future. The present Prime Minister is the Prime Minister of the country because he saw tomorrow, much before people saw yesterday. And he was not only prepared for tomorrow, he was prepared for day after tomorrow. So that's why in 2002, he was preparing for 2014. So I'm sure he and a small group of people with him are keeping tabs where it's going, and they will be prepared for 2019. The rest of them will be debating what happened. Thank you. Sorry, I've overstepped my time. May I now request Sandeep Tarka. Sandeep has been a media professional for several years, and he is expert with all the numbers. So but he can tell you what this whole game is about.
Actually, I consider Amit my guru. You know, there are times when I just go and sit at his feet to understand this world that is already impinged upon us and we don't know yet. And it's always been a pleasure listening to him. I remember several of his presentations, and 10 years back he talked about something called the blog. When people sitting in the audience, none of them knew what the blog was. And I was one of the fortunate ones who had just read about it a couple of days earlier, so I could relate to what he was saying. So what I've actually, the beauty of talking after Amit is that everything that you will say will sound very banal and very, because he has I think the kind of experience he brings to the party and the kind of, the vision of the future is really unparalleled. But I'll just quickly tell you what I have to tell you. I think this is a very nice quote that I found, which is the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I think it's definitely not been distributed among the media and the advertising kinds, as Amit said. So it's something which is, I was recently in Los Angeles in a digital conference, and it was really fascinating to see speaker after speaker coming and talk about some amazing case studies of the kind of work they've done. And you really start thinking at that point that, where the hell are these ideas? Why are we not thinking them to begin with? So I think these are 4 mega trends that I've been talking about for years, and I fortunately, it's not changing, but it just accelerates, just change. Am I audible at the back?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are 4 mega trends, which I think one of them is greater choice, greater control, fewer intermediaries, and that's something which is in everything that we do. We are now talking of Internet of Things, machine talking to machines, which means no intermediaries at all. Your refrigerator opening, ordering the food for you, and your living room deciding that there are 3 people in the room, so I need to change the temperature in whatever, because there's more body heat being generated, and so on and so forth. I think it's just basically a lot of negative a lot of negative effort that we end up putting is kind of taken out of our lives with these machines. Information translucency, I think in spite of the fact that there is information available to everyone, we often find that I think that needs to be just put on once. It could have gone off. There is audience fragmentation, that's the third thing. Information translucency makes basically everyone's life very difficult, anybody who's doing business, because for us, for example, as retailers, one of the easiest things is for customers to come to our electronic store, take a demo, and then stand there and check out the prices on the net and order right there from the shop and walk out. So which means I have wasted time, my staff has wasted time behind taking the customer to the demo, and then we lost the sale anyway. There is audience fragmentation. So we obviously need to be really on top of our game if we really want to get that same. Audience fragmentation, audiences are fragmenting everywhere, and more messages and less time. So I think, like Amit said, change is not a constant anymore, it's accelerating every day. Okay, media is at the center of everything that we do today. So I think all aspects of, if you look at, this is a picture made by a student, and really speaking, he's talking about all the stuff that is in his life, but there is media at the center of it all. And I think the role of media has changed dramatically over the past few years through all of the changes that we spoke about. I think in the past, media was the primary source for entertaining and informing you. And there was, in spite of the fact there were thousands and thousands of media owners, it was still an oligopoly. It was still few people deciding what the country was thinking. And everybody else among us was basically media consumer. We just consumed what was coming our way. And today I think self-expression is really the new form of entertainment for people. So if you just look at, everybody is finding the selfie generation that we talk of today. Now I think that look at the number of devices. I wish I could get, I just recently bought a selfie stick where you put your phone and you can take a selfie from distance, just because I found the concept very fascinating. But just, yeah, that's exactly what I bought. And you can really extend it for 10 feet and whatever, you can take a selfie. It's got a Bluetooth, this thing at the handle, which is, so you sensor at the handle, so you put the phone there and click from here. It's fascinating, and just the way people want to. So all of us are now media owners. Everybody is there is no media, it's media anarchy, not an oligopoly anymore. Everyone is a media owner. And what does that do to the media consumer? The consumer today is half informed. He gets one bit of information that's enough for him. He'll make a whole story around it. He'll publish it. He'll go online and publish it very soon. Extremely impatient. There is absolutely no time. You get a story, you need to share it now. And all your friends. And we see some of this leading to positive and negative change. So I'll talk about some of that. Highly opinionated. I think this is one key. So, throughout this 2014 election, one of the most fascinating things of this election, apart from, of course, the way I think the Modi ran the entire campaign and the way he steered it, the other fascinating story for me was what was being called the media trolls. The Hindu media trolls on one side and AAP-tards on the other end, and the kind of fight that they were having in media. It was really a fascinating aspect of the very opinionated. People had their opinions and they stood by them, and very loud. So you have an opinion, you also have to express it. They are very open and very keen to express it, and it gives them a lot of power to become judge, jury, and executioner. Unfortunately, Arnab is not the only one who does that now. The whole country can do it. So he's now not in that minority of one anymore. Everyone, all of us are capable of doing that. And there obviously there are advantages to that. The speed with which news can spread now is, so I think today, this has got both the speed and the spread of news is really fast. I remember one day in 1995 when someone came up and said, Ganeshji's Murthy is drinking milk today. And I remember the whole country and my aunt from Africa calling me up, and all over the world, suddenly this news spread. This was before the era of Google. Google was not even born then. This was 1995. Okay, and that it happened, and then it was news. That something like this happened today fascinated one entire community, and the world didn't know how it happened. And how did the news spread? And how did people across the world come to know and try to do the same thing at the same time and had stories to share about it? And it was fascinating. Just imagine something like that happening today. So can you imagine what will happen on Facebook and Twitter if something like this, if some phenomenon like this actually came forward today? And there are of course positives and negatives. So there is, if you remember, the mad cow disease was something which, so obviously even I believe that there is some sort of conspiracy which to sell pharmaceutical companies to sell their drugs will invent these diseases. So there was mad cow disease first, and then there was avian flu, and now the Ebola virus. But the thing between the three of them I find is that mad cow disease, I don't think anyone even came to know. Now you can argue that we are not a beef eating nation, so maybe it didn't touch us in that sense. Bird flu is something that we became aware over a period of time. By then the vaccines were already found, and so it didn't really matter. But Ebola virus, I think the whole of India is on kind of attention. And that is because we are living in a very hyper-connected age. Everyone seems to know about Ebola. And I have some really very nice and dumb cousins who are not really interested. They're just interested in having a good time. And I talk to them very often to just figure out what are the And they live in small towns and they're very happy with their lives. They don't care. Even they've heard of Ebola virus. So they were also asking me, why kya hone wala isse? You know, I hope we don't have to worry about this. And so that is the world. And if you remember the Azad Maidan riots, this was through morph videos, and somebody just decided to forward something which happened in another country and pass it off as something that happened in Assam and what it led to. There are, of course, we see images of Chinese army forming a human bridge for people to cross over, and we hear that this is something that happened in Uttarakhand. So people, or when the MH370 crashed, the Malaysian airline plane crashed, there were lots of videos being ported, most of them from Hollywood movies, saying this is the last minute of their airline, and there's a exclusive footage that one guy, somebody shot it from a cell phone, and you suddenly see that. So there are advantages and disadvantages to this, really fascinating. And I would just like to leave you with that one thought, that all of us have today the power of really, and I think Amit talked about this, that the whole world actually comes to you through your device. So you'll be consuming not just media, the stuff that you buy, the stuff that you do, the things that you connect with, the people that you connect with, everything happens through this one device. It gives us a tremendous power, but with that power also comes the responsibility that we need to kind of ensure that. And we are a civilization just because we are a civilization that is not really very big on history. So history has now been our strong suit. We don't really, because we believe in cyclical nature of things, and we don't really record things. Whereas Westerners have a fascination for history. And I'm reading currently a book on history of television. I also heard from Amit just now that he's putting together a history of Indian media, 5,000 years, and it's so much information that he can't put it in a book, so I'll make it into open source and I'll make it available to. I'll really look forward to that. But I think with this great power that we have, I think also is probably a great responsibility that we'll have to look at. And I think that's the thought I would like to leave you with. Thank you.
I think that was a very interesting presentation, Sandeep. You made two very important points. One is about audience fragmentation. Absolutely, I agree with you. In fact, now it is, in the next few years, it's going to be about slicing, your target audience or target groups. The thinner you slice, the finer you, better you get. Like sashimi and the Chinese way of cooking. Yes. So it's, we talk about the power of one. What the digital world is doing is it's making the power of one into the power of 7.5 billion. Wow. Each one, it's not 1 plus 1. It's 1 by 1 by 1. So 7 to the power of 7.5 billion people. That's how the technology empowers you. And the other thing which he talked about, and which I mentioned also on a larger thing was, which I agree with him, is about disintermediation. In fact, current web technology and the current web economy is about disintermediation. In the next 5 years, you will come into what I call disintermediation. So that will take it to the next stage, where you will have to selectively re-intermediate. That is where the power of media will come in. It will be about curating. It will be about personalizing. 40 years ago, a gentleman who was then the chairman of JWT Worldwide, he later founded the Media Lab at MIT, told me a very interesting thing, and it took me 30 years to understand it, that the future is about personalized segmentation of media. So it is slicing of media, addressing it to one, and you have to do it for 7.5 billion people. Now we move on to Mr. Rungta, who will...
Thank you, Amitji, for very nice opening remarks and statements. Sushilji, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this event. I'm basically going to elaborate a little bit more in detail, basically where Amitji left off, on how technology has changed in the film industry over the last 65 years and what to expect in the next 10 years. just before we start, it's important to understand what the value chain of the industry is, and what I will do is I will explain how all the four value chains, so rather production, post-production and consumption trends have changed in the past 65 years and how it's going to influence the industry and what opportunities are there for us in India to take advantage of. So just a little timeline. 1880s or 1920s, the kinetoscope was introduced. So that basically means films inside where you put your eye inside and you roll the lever and you get to see motion in images passing. That's what was motion picture initially.
Bioscope was the next version.
Yeah, that's Then there was obviously the Gulf Between was the first film that used Technicolor. That was the first type of color that was used in feature film. And then they had synchronized music score that came in from another movie called The Viking. 3 Technicolor was the new technology that was launched later in the 1930s. And Walt Disney released their first film in 3 Technicolor. And one of the first films to be shot entirely on location was by Paramount Studios in the 1930s. Kodak Eastman was launched in the 1940s and 70s. And at that time in Hollywood, TV was becoming big and people were preferring to watch content on TV. And Hollywood was combating that issue at that time in the US industry. 1980s and 90s, special effects became an integral part of filmmaking, and as my icons clearly suggest, Jurassic Park and Batman were the first 2 major Hollywood blockbusters of the era that used a lot of special effects. And even if you watch Jurassic Park now, in fact it comes on Star Movies once every 2 days, you will still not realize that a film produced and released in 92 had that kind of robotics. It still doesn't look as fake as you think it would look 20 years down the line. So, and now in the 1990s and 2000s, visual effects, special effects is very integral. You look at The Life of Pi. I was actually fortunate in Los Angeles 2 years ago. I met Mr. Hughes from Rhythm and Hughes, the guy who was responsible to execute Life of Pi. And the entire film, I'm sure people have seen the film, the entire film was shot inside a studio in a big tank of water and a boat. There was no ocean, there was nothing. Everything was created in animation and special effects. So there is a making of the film which you must see, and that will really outline or highlight how technology has improved in the last 40, 50 years and what you can really create out of that technology. An Oscar-winning film which has won multiple Oscars last year. And yes, demand for 3D content. 3D's become big. The IMAX experience has become big. There's a lot of new IMAX cinemas in India now. A lot of content that is being shot on the IMAX camera or just shot on regular cameras and then it's being digitized and made better into IMAX technology. Internet has developed. I'll be speaking a little bit more about it later. And Netflix in the US, now they've got about 10 million subscribers worldwide and over 100,000 titles of DVD that you can watch online. So no need to buy DVD and clutter up your den in your house. Motion capture technology was introduced late in the 2000s. It was an integral part of the Avatar film. So if you notice, each of the actors, they were actually actors, they had points all over their body. And that was when they were, so if there's an action of a guy hitting somebody with a tree branch or with the knife or whatever, the movement was captured by 3D software and it was then generated as an animated character on the screen, what you saw in Avatar. So that was some incredible technology, and Avatar was the first film that really proved that motion capture is next generation technology, whether it's to produce games or it is to produce film or even TV commercials. That's the way to go in the future. The film camera was getting replaced by the digital camera. Nobody wanted to spend money on a Kodak film stock anymore, and mostly because everything was turning digital. If a director shot a film on set, he was not able to make any changes to the edit because it was on film. He would have to go back to the studio, get it digitized, and then he would notice, "Arey, maine yahan par galti kar di, mujhe wapas shoot karna padega." And in today's day and age, The artists don't have any time. Everybody wants to get done with, and as soon as possible. Everyone is very impatient now. So just some more stats. 40% of the world's population is now on the internet. Netflix now has about 10 million subscribers. Netflix has basically taken over the US. Hardly anybody wants to watch TV shows or films live. They rather just record it on Netflix and watch it later once they're back home from work. And obviously rise of YouTube and other platforms where people are sharing content and people are viewing content at a click of a button. So this is a little timeline. Quickly, the evolution of production before and after. We used to have bulky film cameras before, very hard to mount, very hard to operate. Now you've got compact digital cameras. Film was used as the media to capture content. Now everything comes in a small pen drive. You had heavy heat generating equipment. In the earlier days, you had halogen lights, you had big cranes.
Arc lights.
Yeah, I'm actually going to mention arc light also. Yeah. Arc lights were one of the new technologies at that time, but very, very heavy intensive. And now you've got Pro LED, and now you have drones that you can attach a camera to, and they can just take shots from any angle, whether it's from top down, from the side. So it's some incredible technology that's available in the market now, and filmmakers are now slowly realizing the importance of new technology, and they're using it to produce films in a different light. And the last point, obviously, directors could never analyze what they had shot because they were shooting on film. And now, because of the digital technology, you have professional monitors on set. After every shot, the director can sit down and analyze where he's gone wrong, or is that shot okay to proceed. So, post-production was one of famous studios' pioneer introductions for the Indian market in 1988. And at that time, we had introduced a processing laboratory because without a processing laboratory, you could not release a film into the cinema, plain and simple. So they were mandatory in the earlier days. Now you've got digital storage technology, so processing laboratories are not existent anymore. Editing machines were very bulky at the time, and you had independent machines to execute different bits of post-production, whether it's editing, special effects, sound. Now, one system can multitask every single job that needs to be done for post-production. You used to have regular Dolby DTS sound before, and now you've got Dolby Atmos, which you can install at home. And Dolby Atmos has got more than 13 channels of sound. And this is, it's an incredible technology. And I think there's only few cinemas in India that have introduced Dolby Atmos. It's something that everyone must go and experience. It is unbelievable. Consumption obviously has changed from the black and white TV to the curved LED TV. We used to have single screen cinemas earlier. Now you've got multiplex theaters and evolution of 3D and the IMAX experience. We had old bulky film projectors. Actually, we still have two now and famous right now where we have to mount the film on, and it's very hard to get spare parts, etc. And now you have the digital projection system, and you can basically play your content direct from space. You don't need negatives, you don't need space to stock anything. VCR tapes, DVDs were popular then, and now you have the cloud. As Amitji's also mentioned, you can stream anything off the cloud, whether it's on Netflix, whether it's on YouTube. Nothing is stored, everything is on the cloud. So just to wrap it up, I think it's very important to understand new technology, what opportunities are available for filmmakers and in general for individuals to use the technology the right way. So as I said, the internet has completely changed the way people are consuming content. You have better bandwidth, so now in the last few years, every single channel is trying to go HD or has gone high def. It is completely changing the experience for the final consumer who's watching television, better picture, better clarity. Production technology is now very cheap. A professional digital film camera now costs as less as 2.5–3 lakh rupees. So you don't need to have very high budgets to produce content anymore. So it's a very good time for anybody who has an art background, who has a script. If they want to produce content, it's the right time, or it's a huge opportunity for people to go out there, shoot, create, and produce meaningful content to release out in the market. It's not for the big. It's not only for the big boys anymore. It's a level playing field. There's a huge. India is lacking in skilled labor. for the media industry. And we're facing it every day. We have about 100 people working in our visual effects team on multiple projects. And whenever we have a graduate design student who comes in for a job, 90% of the times we cannot employ him because he's just not employable because of the current state or the current education that's offered to him in 3D or 2D animation. So there's a huge opportunity to enter this space and basically open institute or tie up with the government to open centers to train young professionals in art, in visual communication, in visual design, and also in turn in film education. Because of India's huge number of films that we produce every year, there's definitely room for improvement for this part of the industry. There's still a lot of red tape in terms of, if somebody wants to shoot in India, there's too many permissions that are required, and India has some of the most exotic locations that anywhere in the world. And it's very important that the government understands this opportunity and they remove a lot of the permissions that are required to shoot and promote India as a filmmaking destination, and in turn it would become a preferred tourist destination for people from outside of the country coming in as well. In terms of consumption, again, smartphones, tablets, almost every middle-class family can now afford cutting-edge technology. You have 3G now, 4G and 5G will be coming in soon. You've got faster bandwidth. It's going to change the way people are going to view content online. New softwares, new apps available online, and at a time now when it's accessible, people should generate content, you should share something that's meaningful to you. And yes, in terms of online streaming, every channel has an online streaming platform now. So if you see starsports.com, a lot of people who are on the move, they can just watch the ISL, or they can watch the Cricket World Cup or the IPL on the move. So it's a huge opportunity to even stream your content online. That's one of the... So now, I just wanted to share a couple of slides. So this is one of the films that we recently did visual effects on. It's called Goinar Baksho. It was a film directed by Aparna Sen, and the daughter was acting in the film. So as you see in the first frame before is basically how they actually shot the film. The entire background was a blue screen, and with new technology, with the talent that we have, we've recreated that entire shot into something very realistic. So this is how we're now using technology, and we've been doing this for the last 10-15 years. So if you look at the frame below, that entire house, or I would say the palace, has been designed in 3D, and we have actually cut out the blue cloth at the back, and we have composited this shot to make it look really realistic. So in conclusion, it's very important as individuals that we must decide how we want to use new media technology. We should use it as a tool for social change. We should produce content as it is a level playing field now. And we should exploit new media technology to generate new avenues of business in education, tourism, and travel. And at the end, I think we should make an impact, we should bridge the gap, and we should inspire. Just a brief history of the studio. We were established in 1945. It's a family-owned company, and we pioneered in introducing technology throughout our history. In the last 65 years, we've seen how the industry has changed from Eastman color to film camera to processing laboratory, and now to the digital age. And we have moved on with the time, and we have seen that change impact the industry over the last 65 years. We produced Sanam, Mela, and Jaan Pehchan with Nargis, Devanand, and Dilip Kumar. One of the first studios to introduce the Mitchell camera in the 1950s with Fali Mistry, who was a very renowned DOP at the time. We had set up one of India's first film processing laboratories and introduced arc lighting technology. In post-production, we were the pioneers, which we introduced in 1980s with editing, sound recording, color grading, and DVD authoring. One of India's first studios to invest in the world-renowned Christie projection system. And we introduced the award-winning Famous House of Animation in 1998, one of India's first animation studios that focused on 2D, 3D, and stop-motion animation. We now operate out of 5 locations in India, and we employ over 250 creative professionals. This is a shot from 1948. and it's now part of National Geographic. So thank you very much for listening.
That was interesting. You encapsulated all the various functions or segments which go into creating films and movies. Let me just, before I ask Srikanth, just add a couple of things. He has touched upon several important milestones. For example, Dolby Atmos. Now, Dolby Atmos is basically an enhanced version of a sound technology. When you sit in front of the TV in a room, because it's not like a theater acoustically designed, what sound engineers discovered was that the sound comes to you in waves, and the waves often get reflected, and there is the equivalent of what is refraction in light. So sound waves refract and create interference pattern, and that actually interferes in certain frequencies. So what they did was, as he's saying, currently there are 13 channels, 13 waves coming from all sides which are being recorded. But the next generation, which should be there in cinemas at least, within the next 5 years, is what we call immersive sound. And the second most important thing, which is why you will still keep on going to the cinemas, is something which, in the absence of a better word, I'm calling sensor vision. Now, sensor vision would be that actually primitive forms of sensor vision already exist. So if you're watching the movie Earthquake, your cinema seat will start shaking. If you feel like you're walking through a field, you will have this fragrance of the flowers. All that stuff is possible. It will start happening very soon. The other thing would be in broadcasting. He mentioned. I just want to make a passing reference that there is. First of all, it's this business. This whole art form is no longer about information and broadcasting. As long as the government of India does not rename this as the Ministry of Media, they will not be on track. Because that is the basic problem. Every minister makes the foolish mistake of sitting in Shastri Bhavan and monitoring TV channels news. They will get nowhere. India is punching far below the weight in this business. Should I tell you that this year, the world media and entertainment industry is going to be $1.4 trillion, which is more than the entire GDP of India. And out of that, what is India's share? It's not even 0.5%. It's $40 billion. It's shameful. We talk, every prime minister, every minister talks about soft power. They don't understand what soft power is. They are happy going once in a year to IFFI in Goa, which is a second-rate, poorly run film festival, and getting themselves photographed. They should be ashamed. And no government worth its salt will be able to control the digital revolution unless they change their mindset. Now we move on to the big data guy, the big guy, Srikanth.
This is a hard act to follow. Towards the end of the day, tired faces in the room. And more important, I'm following someone who comes from Bollywood. I'm following Amit ji, who knows the future and technology a lot better than most of us. And I'm very scared of Sandeep because he called his cousins nice but dumb. I'm worried he'll go back and say I had nice but dumb co-panelists also. So, question, why are we talking about data in a session on media? I'm sure that's a question on everyone's mind. If you look back 15 years ago at Google, Google and internet were new fads, but who would have believed that Google is pretty much among the world's largest media companies today? It's caused the death of the print medium in the United States. It's eating up everyone's lunch. So what I can assure you is, so technology companies have taken over media. Going forward, the way of the future is data will also take over media. So people in media, media professionals, media owners need to watch out for this, need to be prepared for this change. And I would like to assure Kiran Ramsahai, who was so worried about next 75 to 100 years, what's going to happen to the Hindu Dharma. I can assure you that if you use data correctly, that can be your single biggest leverage to build what Amit ji calls as engagement with youth, engagement with the global Hindu fraternity, and that is going to be your Brahmastra actually. So hopefully what I can share with you in the next 10 minutes is with data, basically two themes I'm going to focus on. One is the fact that we are deluged with data, we're drowning in data, and it's a universal challenge. And I'll amplify that shortly. Second is, however, by using new technology, we can harness data. And that for me is the opportunity for the Hindu perspective. So hopefully these two themes, समस्या सबके लिए है, लेकिन हम सब के लिए एक मौका है. That is the underlying theme of the presentation. There's never been such a deluge of data. If you look at the since morning, how many SMSs and how many Facebook comments and how many tweets would the people in this room have done? You would have made phone calls, you would have sent SMSs, you would have looked at emails, all of that. The fact is, by doing all that, you are dealing with data. Each individual processes so much data in a day that in reality, an average person today processes more data in a single day than a person 500 years ago did in his entire lifetime. So look at the paradigm shift. Ek din mein, the amount of data you handle as an individual is what our forefathers did in an entire lifetime. And that is the crux of the problem. And it will only get worse as we go forward. Today, our mobile phone is a data sensor. Tomorrow, your car will become a data center. Your refrigerator will become a data center. You are going to be surrounded and inundated by data. That is the crux of the problem. You look at your life around you. For your news, for your travel, for food-related things, you rely on applications and websites, and you go and search things, you browse things. All of that is because you have access to such useful data. You spend time doing it, and in that process, you generate so much data. What happens as a result is that you're left. I'd go through this many days. At the end of a day, I sit clutching my head saying, I am exhausted. And this is not surprising because at the end of the day, when you dealt with 50 emails and 20 SMSs and 100 spam phone calls that you did not want, you are truly exhausted. And if, now you look at it from the Hindu perspective, what happens when there is too much data? If you try and do a search, as a consumer of Hindu news, do a search for Lord Ganesha. You will get 65 lakh search results. 65 lakh search results for one query which saying Lord Ganesha. Now look at the plight of a poor person, a poor individual who's trying to get this information. He's not going to wade through so many pages with 65 lakh search results. So as a consequence, what happens is you get exhausted and you look at the first 3 or 4 or you're left dissatisfied. So, however, there is an answer to this. How do you convert this misery to magic? And there is a body of research that this lady called Sheena Iyengar, a very well-known researcher in Columbia University, she says when the human brain is such that if you have between 4 to 6 options or choices placed before you, your mind can process it and you take a decision and you're happy about it. So if someone, instead of 65 lakh results in front of you, if you're interested in something to do with Lord Ganesha, and someone gives you 4 to 6 options of things that you're interested in, you're happy. And someone's done the hard work for you. The good news is technology can do this answer for you, provide this answer for you. On the next, I'm going to show you one scary slide. That's the only scary slide in my presentation, so don't get scared. I'm just going to give you a sense of it, just to show, before I get to that to convert misery to magic, we have an opportunity to use technology as a consumer, as media professionals, but most importantly, what I'm going to focus on in the next few minutes is for the Hindu perspective, how can we harness this technology to solve Kiran Ramsahai's problem of worrying about the next 75 years? And that's what I hope to share with you in the next few slides. This technology is mind-boggling, but I'm going to explain it in very simple terms. Today there is a phrase called big data technology. It will become as pervasive as internet is 5 years from now, I can assure you that. But what it does is, this technology has the ability to pick up any and every kind of data in the world. It can pick up Facebook messages, it can pick up tweets, it can pick up Excel sheets, it can pick up anything, and it can process all that and package it for you in a friendly manner. So what happens is, technology does the hard work and process it for you. And I'll give you a very simple example. I'm going to focus on 3 opportunities for the Hindu perspective for using data and harnessing data. One is, it allows us to engage the youth with Hindu Dharma. To me, that is an important aspect of taking the Hindu perspective forward. Second, this hall is full of global Hindus. How can we facilitate the emergence of the global Hindu and build a fraternity and build a brotherhood across the world? And third is, how do you make Hindu power invincible? To me, we have the power of using this technology to able to do all 3 things. Let's take the simple example. That same Google search where you said, I want to know more about Lord Ganesha, you got 65 lakh search results. If you use big data technology and assume this is your mobile phone, and you put a query there, tell me more about Lord Ganesha. And imagine Sushil Pandit. Sushil Pandit is too old for this, so I will not take his name. I'll take your name, the young lady out here. If she puts this query, saying, tell me about Lord Ganesha, because it's her mobile phone, her history of what sites she browses and the kind of person she is, how many phone calls she makes, the phone knows it. What will happen when she does this is, tell me about Lord Ganesha. What she will get on her phone are 6 options, which says, visit Ashtavinayak or Jambukeshwara temple at Trichy. Celebrate the spirit of Ganesh Chaturthi. You can buy those gifts for your family and friends. One is the Ganesha t-shirt and another is a gift. Books that you may like. So what has happened? Now this is so simple at the front end. What has happened is at the back end is massive processing power and intelligence, which says she is a person who will like to see these kind of things, so it is so personalized and placed before her. If you ask the same question, it might produce something else. Because you're wearing a sari of a certain kind, it will not show this t-shirt to you, it might show you a sari, for example. So that is how it gets personalized. And the reason I'm saying this is, today's youth lives with the mobile phone 24 hours a day. They jump from app to app, site to site. If you want to engage the youth with the Hindu perspective, it has to be through a mobile device, it has to be using this kind of intelligence, and that is the power that this group today, which is assembled here, must leverage. Second example, the global Hindu. This is a situation that I have relatives from overseas. When they come to India, they make plans. 4 हफ्ते की छुट्टी पे आए हैं. I have to meet relatives. I have to go and eat certain food, but I also need to visit certain temples. So the question is, which temple should I visit in India? If you do a search on Google which says places of Hindu worship in India, you will get 90 lakh results. Now, आप 4 हफ्ते की छुट्टी पे आ रहे हैं, you don't want to spend even 90 minutes going through 90 lakh results. You don't want to do that. But if this is a phone with one of my relatives, because he is from Tamil Nadu, and because the phone and his past history suggests that he is the Bhakt of Lord Shiva, what he will get are 6 options of all Shiva temples in Tamil Nadu. Fortunately, as a party, the BJP has made progress, particularly with respect to doing great opinion polls and great social media work. But you could end up repeating the same mistake 5 years from now if you don't do something to make this power invincible. So what I'm suggesting here is big data technology can allow you to constantly have a finger on the pulse to track what is the public saying, what is the media reporting, what kind of work is actually happening on the ground in terms of development projects, etc. This information is happening at the ground level across the country, but this technology can process all this, and what it can provide the Prime Minister or the party leadership is a simple booth and constituency level signal. इस constituency में, इस booth में लाल बत्ती है, वहाँ पे चीजें ठीक नहीं हो रही हैं. यहाँ पे हरी बत्ती है, that means everything is proving fine. So you are constantly prepared to defend and protect your power so that you're never taken by surprise like 2004. So in sum, I want to stop here and just sum up what I said. One is very clearly, we are deluged by data, but for this group, it is an opportunity to harness it for the Hindu perspective, A, to engage the youth, B, to make friends with the global Hindu, and finally, to protect the power that you acquired after such great work. That is in heart. Hopefully, at the end of it, it's clear to everyone why data, how is data close to media, and what is the connection with the group that is meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Srikanth. That was very illuminating. Big data is really going to be the next big thing. Curating, as I had mentioned, and his presentation highlights, is going to be very important. Just a quick extension of what he's saying. You know, in the next 2 or 3 years, you will have phones. The first ones are already out, which will have holographic displays. So actually, specifically from the Hindu religion perspective, and you'll be surprised, in 1999, when the first boom happened, I actually registered a website called mandir.com. And we did some extensive work, and I went and met all the big giants of the Silicon Valley. And the idea was to have temples which will have virtual reality. So when you went to a Ram Mandir, you will actually feel entering Ram's house and have that whole sensory experience. Unfortunately, the handicap was that we didn't have enough bandwidth in India. And in those days, it was too small, and there was no way you could implement it. But those problems are being surpassed. So actually, you will have holographic telephones. This is the other thing is that given the next generation, you know, I did as a part of my research, we in 8 cities and 20 villages in India, we accessed young people from the age of 15 to 30 and asked them what is their source of news. And this is just 6 months old. 90% of the city dwellers don't read the newspapers. They don't watch news on TV. So they don't watch it, period. You know, there's no question of good, bad, indifferent. So for them, the only access is social media. So whatever is tweeted, whatever is on the Facebook updates, that is their source of news. Now that in the next generation will get leveraged. So, you know, already there are lakhs of radio stations on. So if Mr. Maharaj is not here from Trinidad and Tobago, he won't have to fight for a license. You don't have to have to find a publisher. You don't have to look for somebody to sponsor your magazine or advertise. So that is the great power, the democracy. And before we open to the question, you know, just to put things in perspective, there's a word in Sanskrit called sampreshan. Sampreshan is actually the first use of communication, but it goes beyond that, and sampreshan is used in the Rig Veda. Sampreshan actually means, when it's a sandhi of 2 words, sam and preshan, which is when you express and that expression is accepted. You cannot communicate by going into a vacuum and वहाँ जाके आकाशवाणी कर रहे हैं और कोई सुने नहीं तो वो communication नहीं है. So actually the first use of the word communication was in Rig Veda, and that's how the word sampreshan actually emerged. Let's have some questions, and then I'll try and sum up at the end if there are any questions. Well, holographic things will impact, it has several uses. One of the first things where it is already under use is in medical research, in surgery. So when you talk of, you know, computerized surgery of heart and stuff like that, so you have holographic images. Now, how is a hologram created? Hologram is nothing as exactly what I told you about sound. So it's the interference of light which comes from different sources. It creates an interference pattern, which is a hologram. Now this, so it's being used already in medical science. It has just started being used in education. We saw some part of it in Mr. Modi's campaign, but that was a very, very amateurish effect, if I may say so, because the people who were doing it had not worked with the current technology available. So you will find it in this kind of presentations. It's in malls, for example. You have those what is called activation. So that it will happen. So when you go to see a product, you will actually be able to see. Now that same thing is being applied in television and phones. People realize that television content, most of it is the way it is shot, does not lend itself to holography imagery. I mean, what you do in a news, you can't create, hologram will not do much. But in entertainment, especially gaming, which is where it's first coming in, to just put things in perspective, the world gaming industry is twice the size of the world film industry. It's a $200 billion industry worldwide. And in India, it is just 2,000 crores. So that's how holography will come, and then it will come to the theaters. When I talked of the immersive experience and the holographic phones, the mobile phones is there already. It's there, holographic phone. I think you will find probably Samsung coming out with, for sale in the next 2 or 3 years. It'll help you think in things like, when you are buying mobile commerce. So you'll see a thing. So you want to buy glass or a pressure cooker. So it'll actually give you a sense of what it looks like in 3D. Or you want to see you're buying a house, so you can't visit many places. So you're hiring a house. You'll be able to actually see the whole experience move through it. I think somebody did this. Yes.
My question is more psychological level, less technological. It's like we all know the selfies came into life because of Facebook and Instagram. Are our society moving more towards narcissism because of this selfies and Facebook and Instagram?
Personally, no. I'll take my other colleagues. I don't think so. This is a fad. It's, as he said, that now you have the selfie boom available, which actually fits onto your mobile phone, or you can hold it in your hand and keep it away and take a group selfie. So it also allows you to take larger group things. It's just the number of selfies which are coming. So now you have a full feed, which was launched during the Football World Cup. So it was the things. So these are all things. Maybe you would like to.
Yeah, I think it's while it's a fad, but I think one of the things that I was saying is that self-expression is the new entertainment. So I think in everything you want to see entertainment not just as is. I want to see myself as a part of it, and I think selfie is fulfilling that first need. Soon you will probably have technology where you can be a part of a film. My son makes these movies using this Apple's software every second day. So they have a fixed pattern right now.
Immersive film is one in which you will be a part.
You'll be part of the film. So I think everything it's going to only. It's about it's a trend of you wanting to be a part of the action rather than just being a silent consumer.
So my question is, as we are going towards the digital age, advanced digital age, so we are getting addicted to Google, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everything. So what do you think in next 1 or 2 decades it will lead human brain?
This is the human brain actually.
Because personally I think it more as we are using it in more, it's making us dumb or
No,
stupid.
you're totally mistaken. The human brain doesn't function that way. If you understand neurology, I mean, I can discuss neurology with you separately, but it's not. In fact, the next level of consumer behavior. Let me tell you, for example, Procter and Gamble in the U.S. today employs 3 neurologists. Now you'll say, what does a company which makes soaps and toothpaste do with neurologists? Because the next level of consumer marketing is neural technology. Because the brain, we use only 5% of our brain. And, the capacity of the brain is tremendous. So you will actually, anything which requires skill. And, you may find it dumb because you are not a digital native. You are a digital migrant. And many of the people sitting here are actually digital ignorance. The next generation is all going to be digital migrants. I'll give you one small example. A company like BlackBerry, which was the _1 phone company for enterprises, is suddenly defunct. It's been bought out. As a part of its regeneration, it has come out with a new device called Passport, which they thought will turn the company around. The problem is that device was thought by digital migrants, people who were in their 30s and 40s. So they devised a phone which is difficult to use in one hand, which is critical for the younger generation, people who are 15 and above, and will, So that's a dead device because it requires both the hands. So this is the thumb generation. So you require a device which can be operated with the thumb in one hand, because it was designed by people who belong to the previous generation.
To answer one more thing to your question is things like Google making us dumb. Look at how the way it is empowering you. Before Google, children were told memorize things at school. The emphasis was on storing information in your mind. Now you no longer need to do it. The information is available when you need it. You can apply your mind to using that information. So it just starts, you start using your mind differently.
Yes, please.
Talking about like the next generation, I've often come across this as a question. I'm the mother of a 3-year-old daughter, and the next generation, I feel somehow has kind of become very dependent on technology. There are a lot of questions that come up where you feel as if, at what age would you want to give your child a mobile phone? We've all been raised with books, where writing has not been a problem. We've wrote pages and essays in the matter of an hour. Our children probably don't want to move a finger and just go onto the keyboard and just type, So today it makes you feel as if, do you think that kids in the future will be too dependent on technology?
This is again a question of an analog mind in the digital age. I'll give you an answer. Today, in many kindergarten schools, and kindergarten is not, I'm not talking of any school, kindergarten is a method of teaching. It's a German concept. They have initiated teaching 3-year-olds how to use an iPad or a tablet. Please understand that it is your mind, your parents' mind, your grandparents' mind which said, by writing an essay you know the language, because that's how they were brought up. If I do not need that skill to write, but I need a different skill. As he said, that you will have an overload of data. So the skill which would be required of your children would be how to synthesize that data, to curate, to relate to it, what to select. So every generation has, that's why I gave, in the beginning of my comments, I gave traced the whole history, that well, first how the records were there, then this, then the online. When the first Apple iPod came, it was 8 GB. No, 2 GB. 2 GB. And they said, it could record some 10,000 songs. And they said, what do you need? Anybody will need for more than this. I've got the first Avid editing machine in India, which he was mentioning, the digital editing machine, in the late 80s. And the hard drive had 1 GB memory. And it was a big thing that, it could store so much. And within 3 years, we said, 1 GB is not enough. So we got more 1 GB drives because there was nothing more than that. Today a telephone comes with 32 GB, 64 GBs, 250. That's going to be a non-issue. So these are changes which come, and I have been involved. I am involved in anthropology, and I meet various scholars and students of anthropology around the world. So they are seized with what you see. The two things, I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. More people in 2014 are learning Indian classical music than what they did in the previous 100 years. In 1 year, there are more Indian children around the world who are learning classical dance, Kathak, Bharatanatyam, Mohiniyattam, around the world than what they did in 1 year.
I know, but the one.
So you know, if the children were not leaving the tradition,
But the one thing I wanted to ask you was that somewhere, don't you think overuse of technology or the way the kids are using technology today will kind of curb their creativity?
how?
The reason
Why?
when we were young,
No,
we never had
please don't
mobile
talk about when you were young, because when your parents were young, things were even different, and when your grandparents were alive, things were even different. Do you know one thing? This year, in 2 months, the World Lagori Championship, Professional Lagori Championship is being held. It will be telecast live. You know what is Lagori? What in North India is called Pittu.
Oh, yeah.
It's a world championship. It is going to be, you will find. So there is a revival. You know, Malkham. Have you heard of Malkham?
Yeah.
Malkham was started from Maharashtra. It was in fact, one of the places where it was taught was the Sangh. Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh actually used to teach Malkham. No, not Pole. So today Malkham, it was nearly it has already been a demonstration sport in the Olympics. It may make a beginning in the next 15-20 years. So, you know, traditional Kabaddi is already in Asian Games, and it was in Commonwealth Games. It will probably come into the. Yes, sorry.
So
You
what
can
you're
talk to
saying
me
is,
separately. You know, after any one of us, we'll be here.
Any more questions?
Yeah. This is regarding the uses and reliability of the data. What is the best way of using data, and how far it is reliable on the internet? Can you explain me what are the precautions required to be taken while using that data?
Any good source of data will always designate its source. It's called annotation. So if it is not annotated, if it does not tell me where it is taken from, like Wikipedia is not reliable, because anybody can go on to Wikipedia and type. But if it's somebody is good, so that's what big data will enable. It will allow you the ability to siphon or to sieve through data, which is very important, which is what Srikant said. And when he was specifically talking about the Hindu religion, it's this, that, you know, it's not just about going into, you know, when he put his Facebook pages, there were so many trolls. So all that will be eliminated, because a machine will be able to answer these trolls automatically. So it will be a slanging match between two machines. He will not waste his time.
Just to actually, you know, to add to what the lady was asking earlier, there is a tool now which actually summarizes a book, because today people don't have time. So there is an app which summarizes a book into 1 page or 2 pages. So all the key things that you need to learn from that book, you'll get it. And then if you're interested in more, you can click and get more information. So I think the future generations will learn things very differently. I don't think you should worry. Technology will only make it more exciting for them to learn.
Just to take your point further, there are two issues which my mind is currently very engaged with. One, we have just in the last 3 days, I'm talking literally 3 days, started seeing that word in the newspapers, and that's net neutrality. In the big data world, that's going to be very important. What is net neutrality is that going forward, when there is going to be no shortage of bandwidth, there is going to be so much of data, the telcos, the telephone companies, the cable companies will actually say, you know, tie up with an application. So let's say Facebook or Google, and they say if you want to use Google, you can only go through internet from Bharti. Now that is or if you want to go to, you know, download a particular film, you please go to Reliance, or you want to go, you please go to Hathway Cable. Because currently there is no law. That is being debated in the US. It will be decided. It's actually gone to the president now. The FCC is for net neutrality. In India, this debate has not even started.
It did actually with DTH.
No, that's separate. That's not net neutrality. Internet, that's not net neutrality. That is interoperability.
It's reflecting similar conflicts there.
No, that's not, because there are, you know, DTH traditionally, India has the largest number of DTH players. We have 6. All over the world there are 2 or 3. Because DTH only is internationally 20% of the market. 80% is cable. And going forward, that is because internet cannot give you interactivity, DTH. So it's not going to be a problem with DTH with the thing. So net neutrality is very important. That will impact you. Second thing, which is of even graver importance, is what, and I'm involved with a small group, there are 20 of us from around the world who have signed a charter which is currently being debated in the European Union of protecting your digital identity. Because your virtual identity will be as important and as precious as your real identity. Because when all the m-commerce and e-commerce and everything which you do is there's going to be in the cloud, what about how do you protect it? So privacy is one issue, your digital identity, so that hackers don't come in and steal your identity. So how do you protect? So we are trying to actually create a movement that should be part of as a fundamental human right at the global level. Second thing which is very important is ownership of digital data. In big data, that's a big issue. I'm again involved in an international group which is thinking about this, that as this big data cloud increases, today what we are used to is every time you use an app or even an email. So when you want to join Google or any of these email services, you have to sign something which says, I accept terms and conditions. Do you know it's a 60-page agreement which you are signing? And we have seen the first implication of it 4 months ago in India about the ownership of the Prime Minister's office account. Now, technically, neither Manmohan Singh owned the account, nor the PMO owned the account, nor the current PMO owns it, nor Narendra Modi owns it. Because it is Gmail which owns it, or whoever is the service provider. Because they all, when they signed the contract, they have given away the rights to them. Then it is about how do you treat IPR, copyright, in the digital framework. Because the moral right which is there with the author in the books is not enforceable in the digital world. So these are very complex problems which are cropping up as we talk of it. It's not that everything is going to be, roses and last questions.
Sir, let's go back to Hindu and media and technology, because we are going on a higher technology.
Yeah.
We want to have a simple, good way of life for our kids in the future.
First, there is no, sorry.
No, I'm coming. So, Mr. Srikanth said, how are we going to have good influence for our kids, the youth? How can we show them the better way of life? So that is an important question for the future. What are we going to do? The Hindu way of life for our kids in the future,
Sir,
using this technology. That's one. Second thing, you said you made 200, 300 soap series. What is your opinion about the soap series and our way of life, the effects of the soap series in our Hinduism way of life? It's a media, ghar ghar ka jhagda, cheating, suicide. So please, your vision about the soap series and our Hindu way of life.
There's another session for this. This particular issue is going to be dealt in the entertainment session. So what is happening to our entertainment?
Yeah. Okay, I'm coming.
This is specific technology.
So, we are going to the higher technology, but the basic is we are all Hindus, and we have to think how to use this technology for a better life. And if Mr. Urungta says that there are no skilled people anymore in India, less for all these things, so then I'm very concerned about the future. While the technology is going up and the skilled labor are becoming less, then how are we going to change into a better life for our kids?
So can I just start with your point? I never said that the skill level is going down. I said that technology is going up so rapidly, we don't have enough skilled people to cope up with that technology rise. And I said it in a way that there is an opportunity in India for students to learn more about how to create something. I'm sure many people will agree with me. Historically in India, parents have always told their kids, there's no future for you in art. Either you become an engineer or you become somebody, or you run your own business or whatever. Whenever some kid used to say, oh, I like photography, or I want to shoot a film, or I want to draw a painting, and that's going to be my life, that was always considered as, oh, ye to hobby hai. You know, it was never given importance that you can actually make this into a career. But with the rise in technology, with new, everyone has been talking about apps and making sense of data. There is a huge opportunity for the new breed of talented individuals to learn more and make technology part of their life and excel in that. So coming to your point, there's a huge opportunity for our kids to enter the field of media and make a name for themselves, make their community proud, and make a name for India. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, just let me add, the government in the last budget has actually announced it was announced earlier, but it's now being finalized, the setting up the Institute of Visual Effects and Gaming and Animation in Hyderabad. It will be like an IIT or like the FTI. So that's the first step. There are other state governments who are setting up institutes to train more people. I think, thank you all. We've talked a lot, all of us, and me especially. I hope you didn't find it boring. I can only end with a shlok from the Vishnu Puran, which says, Pustakasta chaya vidya par hastagatam dhanam, kare kale samatpane nasa vidya nacha dhanam. That knowledge which is in books, or money which is in someone else's hand, is of no use, because when you need it, it doesn't, is not available. So please try and see that as much knowledge is available with you as possible. Thank you.
I think